Now that we know how these drone presets work, one thing more to say. If you notice, they're all set for polyphony base 1. Well, there's no pressing the fingerboard, so there's no use to try and have multiple MPE MIDI voices going on here. In fact, if you try and set this to something higher, you're going to overload things and you won't like the sound that comes out. So in these drone presets, we get our polyphony from a combination of shape generators moving at different rates, triggering things, and also delays that will send sound back in on itself that gives you the impression of multiple voices going on. Now, with this preset, what can we do? There's a lot of things we can do to take these presets and turn them into things that have our own identity imposed on them. First thing we can do is to just double up some oscillators. So let's just duplicate the oscillators that we have to start. A, this one will turn into an oscillator. D, we'll copy in the same frequencies. We'll copy the same amplitude profiles into the sum delay. Now, because we added 3 and 4 to 1 and 2, let's also output 3 in the same way that we output 1. So they're kind of a total mirror of each other now. And we'll get ready to turn that up. But obviously, we're all on this same frequency here. Let's change those frequencies to different values. In this case, we have an octave down as the bass on 3, an octave beneath that on 4, and we'll change it to something different for the second oscillator. Let's see what this sounds like. Okay, that's nice. Let's fiddle around a little bit more. Let's take the new voices that we had come in, and we'll create another shape generator at a different rate for those. So instead of 2 times a second, we'll do this one half the speed. We'll copy in 2 new formulas here. G, we'll copy in A, we'll stick G there. H, we'll copy in D, we'll stick H here. We'll go into G, we'll set that to shape generator 2. We'll go into H, we'll set that to shape generator 2. So that should give us a little different sound. Yeah, you can hear it's a little more complex. Okay, and we can take it one step further, and the profiles, the amplitude profiles going into the sum delay, let's copy those to something different too. So I, let's copy in B, we'll stick I here, and J, we'll copy in F, and we'll stick J here. So whereas B had a 0.2 as its shape, F had a 0.1, maybe we'll make these two voices a little bit less. This will be a point, maybe 0.6, and maybe J will have a much smaller profile. So these two will 0.3. All right, so the first 2 voices are going to be predominant, and the other 2 will come in at a lesser amplitude profile through the sum delay. Let's see what that sounds like. Here's the original Howl's Dreams. And now Hal dreams again. Nice. One more thing we could do here is use another shape generator, K. And K is going to start changing the waveform of what I have here. So instead of just everything being on a sine, let's go up to about 0.5, and we'll Maybe we'll change this at a much slower rate, 0.1, and we will now go back to K, and K will set to our shape generator 3. We just set in that. We'll set that to our rising and falling shape, and now we'll put K as a waveform modifier on each one of these things. And let's hear that. Perhaps we don't want to change the waveform so much. We can bring this down a bit. So that is a little bit more differentiation in the sound. I think I like it. Okay. That's our new How Dreams Again. And compare that to the original. You know what we can also do? We can increase the range of my sample and hold numbers a bit. And maybe make that a little different on each one. There we go. You can see there's a great number of things you can do here. Let's move in a totally different direction for this modification. Actually, I'm going to keep the overall configuration that was in the original as is. I'm not going to add any oscillators. I'm just going to play around with the pitches, and I'll play around with some of the outputs. Now, with just a little bit of modification, instead of using a sample and hold, I disabled those. What I did here was I used a formula, again with a shape generator. Only this one is just using a normal shape going from 0 to 2, adding to the pitches. So I'm going to go from 0 kilohertz to 2 kilohertz in this sine-like pattern, and I'm going to add that to my 440 hertz. And I'll also just multiply everything by 0.5. I'll bring everything down an octave. So it's not samples, it's just working on the continuous pitch now. And I did two things here. I have a formula that I'm bringing in, shape generator 2. Shape generator 2 is moving very slowly. On this one, I'm using shape generator 2 with, as you can see, no phase offset. On the second oscillator, I'm going to use a phase offset of 0.5. So the two waveforms are going to be opposite of each other. When one is going up, the other one will be going down. And that pitch stream will simply be added to our base 440. Now on the output, what I did was take yet another shape generator, this one a triangle on shape generator 3, but let me change this to actually an even slower value. And what this will do is on I, using that slow shape generator, it's going to go from 0 to 1 in this triangle pattern. So it's going to ramp up and down, and that's going to be used as a volume offset. My base volume is going to go to 0.15 here, because remember, these values don't get set to really large values. So the maximum this is going to be is 1 times my offset value here. One of these is going to go normally with offset of 0. The other one, I'll do what I did before. I'll offset this guy so it will be in the reverse waveform pattern. What do you think this is going to sound like? Let's see. It'll sound nothing like the original. Basically rising and falling alarms. let's do one more thing. Instead of having this rise and fall on this continuous stream, let's make this quantized. All right, so we'll quantize this to a new formula, L. And L we're going to set to a very small value to start. We're going to quantize to L on both formulas, H quantized to L and K quantized to L. Now, this is going to sound virtually identical because my quantization level is so small. But what happens if I raise that quantization? Can you start to hear? It's starting to quantize. As I make that quantization higher, you can definitely hear now what quantization is doing for me. And you can hear the sound is getting louder and softer on each raising and falling cycle. Now, if I wanted to change J to the same phase as I, you can hear they're both getting louder and softer now together. That's what phase can do with you with the same waveform. So that was a good example to show you what this phase offset can do for you. We used 180 degrees out of phase to make the waveforms totally opposite, but you also can set them to be a quarter out of phase or 3/4 out of phase as well, especially if you want to do some nice quadrature stuff. And one last thing is I changed the waveform to be 0.4 on this alarm thing that had a little grittier sound to make it sound more like an alarm. And here's a different take on the same thing. This one, can you hear? It's quite a bit more consonant. It's doing a very similar thing, only I'm arranging the quantization differently. In this one, the formula has a much bigger range, goes to 8, but I'm quantizing C here to 1, which means I'm only going to get out whole numbers from my quantization. Now, instead of adding to a base frequency, I'm multiplying by a base frequency, 3 of them, because I'm using 3 oscillators doing the same thing, that are all an octave apart. And my formulas are quantizing at 3 different rates, but they're all whole numbers. And those whole numbers multiplied by my base frequencies will give the effect, basically, of using the overtone series. And since they're all in octave relationships, it's going to be a very consonant sound just using the first 7 overtones. And here I use another shape generator just as a volume multiplier to make the overall volume in a triangle shape rise and fall a little bit. So let's bring up another drone. Countdown. This one has a oscillating bass tone, if you can hear it, on a shape generator, and other tones that are in an octave frequency. So this one again is very consonant sounding, but it's extremely regular. So I asked myself, what can I do to tweak this just a little bit? And I came up with this countdown I call melodic countdown. Listen to the bass on this one. It's changing to a few pitches, but randomly. How did I do that? Well, instead of using a fixed value of 110 hertz, that's actually brought down an octave, I put a formula on there. And if you look over to the right, there's actually a chain of formulas that I'm using here. I realize that pitches of 90 hertz and pitches of 130 hertz give me a nice pitch relationship to the one that I have here. Let me turn on the display, and you'll see the pitches are coming out here kind of randomly. There's 0.11, there's 0.09, 90 hertz, 110 hertz, there's 130 hertz. Things are taking that 110 hertz, and I'm adding and subtracting an offset on that of 0.02, and that just happens to give me two notes that fall in a nice harmonic relationship. And what did I do to do that? So I took a formula, L, I set that to a random sample and hold. Now, when you use a sample and hold on a line, if you just want to put it on a formula, you can stick it anywhere. And I don't really want this sample and hold to have anything to do with a Big Bang, but it doesn't need to be. As long as it's on some line that's not affecting what you're doing, you can put that anywhere as long as it's on the noise line. So I set up a sample and hold here with a max range of 3, quantizing to 2. So on this, you can see I'm always going to get a value out as it quantizes to either 2 or -2 or 0. One of those three, because I set a very, very small quantization range on it, and I set it slow. There you can see it's 0. It went to -2. It went to +2. It changes randomly. And that's used as ancillary to a formula that multiplies it by 0.01, because I really only want an offset of +02 or -02. And finally, my last formula in the chain simply adds my original pitch of 110 hertz to the sample and hold value that's either going to come out as 0 plus 0.02 or -02, and that's going to give me only 3 pitches that will come out of this random pitch set. My original 110 hertz, my 90 hertz, and my 130 hertz. And that's all I did to add this little bit of random melodic variation to this preset, which I kind of like a lot, instead of just that bass note droning on over and over on the same pitch. Now, that same technique I applied to throat bottle. Here's our throat bottle. Throat bottle uses the same pitches over and over again, but it dynamically varies the formant so that vocal sound constantly shifts. Well, I did the same thing that I did on the last preset to this. Only I put this little modifier on both of the voices of the throat bottle, so I get a random variation of those 3 pitches in each of the voices. This makes it a little easier for me to listen to it for a long period of time. So those are some techniques that you can use to take these drones and slightly modify them. Of course, you can go and do something a little bit more drastic. In this one, I have this background motion that's being sent through the sum delay as before, that I've offset down an octave and changed the waveform to be a little different on 2 oscillators. But the big thing about this preset is that another couple oscillators are sent directly to the outputs. Again, a shape generator is being applied. But now, instead of these nice, smooth, curved generators, I'm using a square wave set to a pretty high frequency. In this case, I've set it to 9 times 2, 18 times a second. Remember, when typing constants into the matrix, you can't type past 9. You have to type up to 9 and then use some kind of multiplier or use a formula that you can set to a value. And on the other output, I'm doing something similar, but now I'm using a pulse. Let's just listen to what would happen to this if I change the pulsing shapes to our smooth shapes. It's not quite as broken up, but it's still quite chaotic because the frequency is still kind of high. So there you go, some easy ways that you can take the drones and make them your own.